Okay, are we ready? Yes? Okay, great. Welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to the Good Schools Guide Forum. My name is Lucinda Lafferty. I'm the Managing Director of the Good Schools Guide. And we are here today with a fantastic panel to talk about an interesting topic. So I'm going to introduce the panel and then give a bit of an introduction about what we're going to talk about, and then we will jump right in. So today with me I have Ben McCarey to my right here. Ben McCarey is the head of Frensham Heights, which is a co-educational setting, so boys and girls. He can tell you a little bit about the school in a minute for those of you who don't know, but I'm really interested to hear what Ben says about the topic of should boys and girls be educated separately, because Frensham Heights is known to be a particularly progressive school, and so I'm sure there'll be some strong opinions about that. Then we have Karen Williams. Karen Williams is the Director of Admissions and Marketing at Benenden School, which is an all-girls school. So Karen represents the only school on our panel that it is a single-sex school environment. And so Benenden is all girls, and it's a boarding school. And I think the majority of the girls board. So is it more than 3/4 of them board?
90% of them board.
90% of them board. Okay, great. That's down in Kent. And Karen has worked at various different schools, co-ed and single-sex schools, so
Absolutely.
has experience from both sides. Yes. And then we have Hugh Thomas. So Hugh is at Dauntsey's, so head of Pastoral, Director of Pastoral?
That's right, Pastoral Deputy Head.
Pastoral Deputy Head at Dauntsey's. So obviously has a lot to do with the students and understanding how they are learning, how they're being supported, etc. Previous to being at Dauntsey's, Hugh was at St Edward's over in Oxford, which is an all-boys school, and was there...
Co-ed.
Oh, co-ed. Okay, sorry. So has experience from there as well. Okay, so we are going to be talking about single-sex education versus co-ed education. What is the right setting for your child? I'm really hoping that today there will be a lot of different views given to the audience, because we've done a lot of these talks on what is best, single-sex or co-ed in terms of environment for your child. And every single time we do this panel, my panel members say that it depends on the child. So for those of you who are in the audience who are wondering what is going to be the best environment for your child, should we send them to a single-sex school? Is that going to be better for them, or are they going to be thriving better in a co-ed environment? Really, it depends on your child, and it's a really, really hard question to answer. It depends on the individual. So, that being a very hard question to answer, what information can you gather to put you in the best position to make that right step and make that right choice as to what is going to hopefully be the best environment for your child? Well, that's what we're going to be discussing today. So I'm hoping that we're going to hear some research and some stats around girls' education outcomes, boys' education outcomes, co-ed education outcomes, results. We'll be talking a little bit about subject choices, preparation for life. We'll be delving a little bit into gossiping girls and toxic masculinity, and gender issues as well, so that you can understand all of the different points of view and all of the different things to consider. I don't mind the panel disagreeing with each other, so I actually encourage that. I think it's really important for parents to hear the different perspectives that teachers and school leaders are able to give, to inform you really well for your choices. So, let's delve right in. I'm really keen to hear from Karen if you have some stats at your fingertips, which all heads and senior leadership team members in girls' schools will have about the benefits of all-girls education.
Thank you, Lucinda. Yes, obviously I represent an all-girls school, very successful all-girls school, 90% boarding, 10% day, although we do have quite a lot of flexibility for our girls to be able to go home at the weekends if they like. We have a school of genuinely happy girls, and that is something that is so important to us. In terms of their stats, looking at just our A-levels, over 50% of our girls take maths at A-level, which is unheard of in a co-ed school. The next two most popular subjects are biology and chemistry, so our STEM subjects really are very, very strong. And the girls take those subjects because they love them and they want to do them. Moving beyond that, of course, we have lots of girls that do English and geography. Also, a really strong interest in things like politics and economics. Our head teacher is an economist herself, and she teaches. So that works very well. So in terms of our stats, STEM is extremely strong, but that's because the girls choose to do those subjects, and we have exceptional outcomes. 32% of our A-level grades this year were A-star. And over 70% of our girls went on to their first choice university, 90% of those in Russell Group universities. So we feel that actually they get every opportunity to shine at the subjects they want to do, and we support them all the way.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So that's specifically the subject choices there and results. Ben, I'm really keen to hear from you if you're able to give any stats about the kind of subject choices that are made by girls and by boys in your school, and whether you can agree or disagree with any of what Karen said.
I would very happily disagree. The first thing I want to say is that I think our kids are more than statistics, and I think school statistics is a really dangerous game to start playing. We can all trot out percentages of grades and kids taking different subjects, but actually that depends a lot on what came in the first place in terms of what's going to come out. And I think one of the most dangerous things schools can do is condition kids to believe that they're statistics, and that the statistics that they're going to get in terms of their exam outcomes are going to be defining features of their lives, when in fact their humanity, their relationships with one another, their emotional intelligence, their interests, their intellectual curiosity, their global outlook and their values are going to be just as, if not more important than the statistics they achieve. I'd also like to challenge the notion that in a co-ed environment, you would not get as many girls taking maths as you would in an all-girls environment. Obviously, at Frensham Heights, some of the kids taking maths are boys because some of our students are boys, but there are greater numbers of kids taking A-level maths who happen to be girls this year than there are boys. There are more girls taking A-level physics than there are boys, and there are actually more boys taking A-level dance than there are girls. And those stats, for me, emphasize the importance of kids being identified as individuals. Lower down schools, what we need to do is make sure that everybody has experience to breadth. All of our boys dance from the time they're in year 7. All of our girls take DT and physics from the time they're in year 7. And they're encouraged to make their own choices as they move up through the school based on their own interests, strengths and weaknesses. We wouldn't make these divisions based on any other characteristic in education. Can you imagine if we turned around and said we were going to segregate our schools based on race? They tried that once in one part of the world and it didn't land that well. And so the notion that we should do so based on gender, I find very challenging in the modern world.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm hoping that spice will continue for the rest of the debate today.
You did ask for spice.
I did. So your stats do not mirror what is seen across the rest of the UK. What have you done at your school to do that? You say that you start them early. All the students are taking dance in an early year, etc. What in particular have you done to achieve the kind of stats that you've just said there?
There's a single word that I think is most important here, and it's probably the single biggest thing that parents should be thinking about when they choose a school, and that word is culture. Frensham Heights was founded 100 years ago. It was founded by 3 women in a world where women were not known for founding schools. It was founded on principle from day one in 1925. It was co-educational, it was non-denominational, and it was a day and boarding school. And those are values that we carried through to this day. We have no uniform. The kids call the teachers by their first names. We've removed all of the traditional barriers that the overwhelming majority of schools have, which force the kids into boxes. Every school says that it wants to raise kids as individuals who are outspoken, who stand up for the things they believe in, who live by their values. And then they design systems and structures intended to beat those very same characteristics out of their kids. How many of us as parents say that we want our kids to be uniform? Just think about that word for a moment. And so the reason that our kids are following their interests, not dictated by their gender or by the specific stereotypes that society might be forced on them, is because we don't force them to walk between those lines in any other area of their school life. They're free to be individuals, they're free to express themselves, they're free to make mistakes. It's not chaos, it's not Lord of the Flies, I'll just qualify that. But by creating a culture of intellectual curiosity, of genuine investment in human kindness and in valuing creativity above the idea that the most important thing is getting a grade 9 in maths, that's the thing that liberates kids. to be the best versions of themselves.
Okay. So, parents in this room may be considering Frensham Heights, and from that marketing pitch, or that pitch there in terms of the way that your culture, benefits the school in terms of the gender question. For the parents who are looking at other schools, what advice would you give them if they're looking for a school that encourages students to look beyond gender and achieve the kind of outcomes or the kind of levels where you've got more girls taking A-level maths than boys in a school? What are parents going to be looking for in the school to find schools that have the kind of culture that you've outlined there?
This is the tired old answer, though, isn't it? Because it's know your child, know the school. And I think the best advice I can ever give a parent is go and spend time in a school during the day, because you will get a very strong sense within an hour of who the kids are, of how they're making their decisions, of the relationships that they have with the adults around them. Statistics are, of course, important. And in a school where lots of girls are taking maths, it stands to reason that girls who join that school are more likely to take maths than they would have done if they joined a school where not many girls take maths. It does stand to reason, and there's a strong logical argument to that. And if your daughter taking maths is the most important thing for you, that would be a really, really good reason to choose that school. But I would also encourage parents to look beyond the traditional ingrained views of the purpose of education that we all hold. We've all been through this system. So we've all been indoctrinated in the belief that this path from A to Z is the only line to health, financial success, and a happy life. But the world our kids are living in is not that world. Getting 12 grade 9s at GCSE is no longer the passport to health, wealth, and prosperity that it once was. And actually, when you look at what big employers are looking for, they're looking for much more than that. And that's the thing where you've got to spend time in the schools, see the kids, see how they are. Because when your child joins that school, they're going to become one of those kids. We're all pack animals. We all adapt a little bit to the people around us.
That's really good advice. Thank you.
I might just add a couple of thoughts here as well. I do fully agree with what Ben has said about it being a very reductive process to reduce children into statistics. And a lot of the talk so far has been about academic outcomes, academic percentages, but the advice we would give to parents is actually that they should think beyond just the academic curriculum. There's so much more to school than what's just happening in the classrooms. The social education, the pastoral care, the tutoring, mentoring, the relationship building that goes on outside the classroom is just as important for preparing them for wider life. And just to add a couple of thoughts from what we do at Dauntsey's, we very much try to bridge those national statistics and close those gaps. So we also offer dance programs to the boys when they start in school. It's compulsory in year 7 and 8 with us as well for them to do dance. And what's a real sign of the success of that is the way that we have lots of boys in the sixth form, when it's optional, continuing to do dance and playing lead roles in our dance performing arts shows, for example. And also our house system as well. I think that's a really important way to bring the whole school community together. So we have co-ed houses, for example, in year 7 to 9. And what that provides is that very, I think, normal, real-life mingling of children at that age, spending time together in a way that doesn't separate them. And then in the upper school as well, with the way that we support the children outside of the classroom, we have what's called sibling houses. So we partner girls' and boys' houses together so that they spend time socially together and they organise events together, and they get to know the other sex before, going into the real world and being more prepared for that.
If I can just come back on some of the points here, we absolutely do not beat girls into boxes. They have complete free choice, and of course we offer all of the things that we've spoken about here in terms of the pastoral, the wellbeing, the extension, all of the other things they enjoy doing. I gave stats, and I gave academic stats because I was asked to give stats, so I gave you stats. But there are so many other things I think with girls' schools that the girls have an innate confidence. They have a confidence in being a woman. They have a confidence in a room. They expect to be there. There is evidence that girls that go to all-girls schools go on to hold more senior leadership positions in all sorts of walks of life, including sort of big business, philanthropy, medical, research, education, than girls that go to co-ed schools. The other very big stat is around girls and competitive sport. It's really interesting. If you looked at the female athletes that were representing the UK or Great Britain in Paris, 25% of them went to all-girls schools. And there's no mistake in those facts. They are clear facts. Girls in all girls' schools have that confidence and that dedication to go on and continue with their sport, their academic studies, their interest in the world. And we look to, as most all girls' schools, turn out confident young women who, have enjoyed their schooling. They've chosen the subjects they want to do. They've had the support to do that without the distractions that perhaps come at a co-ed school. And there is evidence, of course, that girls do mature more quickly than boys. And we often have girls come to us who say, oh, I really enjoy school, but I get distracted by the boys, particularly the younger ones. And girls are ready to study sooner. They are willing to settle down and take those positions of responsibility earlier. And we encourage them to do so. And give them the opportunities to make the most of those natural elements in their lives. They are going to mature more quickly. They are going to settle down more quickly. That balances out at A-level, but by then our girls have enjoyed their schooling and made connections and understood what they have got to offer the world.
Thank you, Karen. I was going to bring that up as well, because I agree. Obviously, Karen was able to give us some stats in terms of subject choices and grades, etc., and achievement. But the stats and the research into the senior leadership role percentages of girls that went to all girls schools and the competitive sport percentages are striking. So I don't know if you're going to be commenting on that, but yeah, keen to hear your thoughts on that.
I think the example of the really successful working woman is exactly the reason why boys need to be in schools with girls, actually. Because boys need to see young women, girls in schools, in leadership positions, for example. So having a prefect body that's made up of boys and girls in sixth forms, in lower schools, house captains that are boys and girls, sports teams captains that are boys and girls. I think that's absolutely a real nursery for children in schools to understand what it is to work with people who are leaders in their own field, and that, again, that kind of moving into the real world beyond that, where women or girls from all girls schools go on to be very successful. I think it's really important that boys see that replicated in the school format where leadership positions are accessed by the children. And there's a second thing I'd add as well, which is that I don't think that distraction in classrooms is a gender-based issue. I've seen girls distract girls. I've seen boys distract boys. I think the key thing in that environment is actually classroom management. And so again, my advice to parents is not just to think, well, if my daughter's going to be around daughters, she'll concentrate better. The question should actually be, what's the quality of the teachers? You know, what is the management like in the school to develop teachers, to train teachers, to retain teachers, to recruit fantastic teachers? That, I think, needs to be part of parents' thinking as well, not just to assume that if a girl's in a classroom with boys, they'll by default just be distracted.
Great. Ben, any comments?
I mean, again, it comes down to individuals. It does, and it's that woolly phrase which I don't mean to use, but I suppose schools should be a microcosm of the society in which our kids are going to live. They should represent that society. They should prepare them for that society, and they should prepare them to be great human beings within that society. And none of our kids are going to go out into a world where they will not be exposed to the opposite gender. Schools are also a safe environment. They're a place where kids make mistakes, and they're going to make mistakes in those relationships as well, because it happens, right? It's not just schools where men behave in a toxic manner. It happens in the world that we live in as well. And if we're going to create a better world, we have to do it we have to start in schools, and we have to start by educating boys how to behave around girls, by educating girls as to some of the things that boys might do, not exposing them to them, but empowering them, and actually actively encouraging healthy relationships and mutual respect between the genders, so that when these young people are in the boardroom, or when these young people are in the football stands, or when these young people are in the theatre, or down the pub, or in a nightclub, they know what those boundaries are, and they can contribute to making the adult world a better place than it currently is today, particularly for young women.
Are there any red flags that you would say that a parent needs to look out for when they're looking at schools that might suggest that they do not support boys and girls in the way that they need to be supported?
If I can come back on that, I mean, absolutely. Our girls are educated. They know they're going to be going out into a world that is a co-ed world. They'll go to university with boys. They'll go on and work with boys and young men. I thought it was interesting that you gave an example of why boys need to see successful girls, but not the other way around. So I think that's quite interesting that girls do have that opportunity to really grow and become leaders in their field in girls' schools. I think in terms of preparing them, certainly at a school like ours, we work very closely with an all-boys school. We work very closely with Tunbridge School, which is about 25 minutes away. We have a very similar educational ethos. We are both full boarding schools, but also with day boys and day girls. It's not that horrible sort of disco where you've got all the girls on one side and all the boys on the other side until the last 5 minutes in the evening they finally speak. It is so much more than that. They get together for things like empathy days when they'll be given a subject and they'll debate it. We have extremely strong debating events across the schools. They do Model United Nations together. We run conferences and bring the boys to us or the girls to them with other schools, with co-ed schools as well, to give them that opportunity to really see beyond what could be viewed as a bubble. It's not a bubble. They go out and they work in the community. They work with other schools. They do CCF, Combined Cadet Force. They do Duke of Edinburgh, where they're out working with other schools, with boys, with girls, with co-ed schools. So whilst as a girls' school, we are very strong proponents of all-girls education, we're completely realistic. Absolutely realistic. This is not an all-girls school that might have been set up 100 years ago where the girls were closeted and didn't have the opportunity to interact with boys. Of course they do. So
is that new though, Karen? Because 20, 30 years ago, that wasn't really the case for girls' schools and for boys' schools. They didn't do as much in terms of partnerships and working with schools of the other gender. It seems to be quite a recent thing.
Yeah, absolutely. As I touched upon, schools over 100 years ago would very much be an all-girls school and an all-boys school, and they would not meet. I think more and more as we go forward, there are opportunities there, and I think it has changed quite dramatically, certainly over the last 10 years and probably the last 20 years. Looking around the room here, some of you would have been at schools in that period of time, some of you would have left before that. I don't know, some of you might have attended single-sex schools. And it is very different now. I've been talking to some seniors this morning from Benenden, and they were saying, oh, love the school, made loads of friends, absolutely marvellous, but it's really good to see how the school has evolved, and particularly, I think, in terms of our interaction with the boys. We are never going to become a co-ed school. We have no desire to go down that route. Our head is absolutely passionate about all-girls education, the benefits of all-girls education, and with the stats that you've touched upon and I spoke about, there's a reason for that, and we believe that's the right way to go. But of course they need to meet with boys. Of course they need to work in a co-ed environment.
What I might add as well, I think it's just worth touching on the benefits that the girls get from co-ed environments as well, because you are right to point out a lot of the focus so far has been what do boys get perhaps from that, but I ran a boarding house in my previous school, and it was co-educational in the sixth form. So boys and girls, both living in the same building, sharing the same house together. And the benefit was reciprocal. It was really interesting to see as an exercise where boys, yes, would benefit from living and working with girls, where girls would often practice and model really conscientious behaviours that would have a positive impact on the way that boys treated each other and engaged with their studies, for example. But what was brilliant to see was actually the impact of boys' behaviours on girls in a positive way, where there was a resilience in the girls that they developed from seeing the way that boys were able to be resilient in those social ways towards each other as well. There was a level of risk-taking that the girls were willing to take that I've not necessarily seen in girls previously. So there is definitely a reciprocal benefit in that co-ed environment for girls and boys.
And more than ever important for schools to get that right now. There's a huge amount of expectation and pressure on schools to manage that successfully.
I think there is, and what we're talking about here is kind of so far is reintegrating boys and girls who've previously been separated. A boarding house where they've been in separate boarding houses and then they come back together for sixth form, or an event for girls and boys schools to come together so they can have experience of mixing across the genders. But that's relying on the separation to have existed in the first place. And I suppose my philosophy would be that we don't separate them in the first place.
Is your school completely gender blind?
It's not gender blind. But all of our boarding houses are co-ed from year 7 upwards.
And how many schools in the UK have that?
I couldn't tell you. We're probably not the only one, but there's probably not many.
No, just a few. Yeah, really interesting. Sorry,
but,
carry on.
But the word, I mean, gender blind's a loaded question in this, a loaded phrase in this day and age, right? When we talk about kids and gender, we're not just talking about boys and girls. Certainly not if we listen to young people today and how they view this question. Whether we agree with them as adults or not is totally irrelevant because that's their world. But I also think part of the reason that issue exists in our society is because we force these binaries onto kids. We say girls wear this, boys wear this, especially in schools, right? Boys wear a skirt, boys wear trousers, girls wear a skirt. And so we're forcing kids to make a choice of which one they are to some extent. Okay, whether everybody views that as a choice or not, by the by. And actually what we're doing is forcing a binary. If those kids can wear whatever they want to wear on any given day, then a child isn't forced to say, I feel different, I'm not comfortable with who I am, therefore I am boy, or therefore I am girl. If I want to wear a skirt today, I'll wear a skirt today. If I want to wear trousers tomorrow, I'll wear trousers tomorrow. And nobody's going to define me by that. Nobody's going to question that. And so it's not about gender blindness, because kids these days are not gender blind. They see gender in ways that we never will, and in ways that, however hard we try to empathize, we'll never fully understand.
Yeah.
But it's about not defining them or their actions by presupposed notions of gender.
Do you do any separation of boys and girls at all for any subjects or sports or?
A little bit in sport. We have co-ed cricket, co-ed football all the way up, and we also have a separate girls team and a separate boys team for football and cricket, so nobody's being denied that opportunity, but the co-ed option is there. Where contact rugby comes in, that's where we'll have gender separation. But beyond that, we've got co-ed options on pretty much everything, I think.
Let's talk a little bit about gender then. So, Karen, in an all-girls environment, for any of your girls who are questioning their gender, how is that managed?
I think all of our girls, obviously they are teenage girls, they are going through enormous changes in their lives, both sort of emotional, physical and obviously educational. We look to support every single girl in whatever path they want to take. Obviously we have an extremely strong pastoral support team, house mistresses or house masters, we have a medical team, we have counsellors, we have chaplains, we have every member of staff who's obviously safeguarding trained and able to spot anything where girls are perhaps either exhibiting a challenge within themselves or within others. We will support them in what they want to be. They are an all-girls school. It doesn't mean that we don't recognise those girls that are questioning their gender. We will support each individual girl in the house or across the school.
Let's talk a little bit about toxic masculinity. Is it worse in an all-boys environment?
I would be qualified to answer because I haven't worked in an all-boys school, so I wouldn't want to suggest that it possibly is. What I can say, though, is what are the benefits of being in a co-educational environment to target and combat toxic masculinity? So I'd refer to my earlier point about seeing girls being successful in leadership roles around school. I think that's a really positive thing for boys to witness and observe. I think PSHE programs are absolutely critical for being proactive in not just waiting for toxic masculinity to arise before you address it, but to take proactive steps to try and nip it in the bud before it emerges within your community. So our PSHE program, we start from year 7 and all the way through to this upper 6th and year 13 as well. The children are educated on those sorts of issues, and toxic masculinity is a big thing that we focus on. We also have very strict phone rules, so we recognise that social media is very difficult for us to regulate as a school, very hard for us to filter exactly what children are exposed to online. Of course, we have filtering and monitoring systems that work with our school internet and Wi-Fi, but children only need to turn on their 4G and then suddenly they've got access to everything. So the children aren't allowed their phones through the school day until they get to the 6th form, and then when they're in the 6th form, it's a kind of on a no-site basis. So they're not expected to have it out at any point in the school day. So that's another one of our approaches to try to combat it.
Does it?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, looking at the statistics and the behavioural patterns in school, we have very, very, very few examples of toxic masculinity that we have to address. That can sound complacent, and I don't say that from a complacent point of view at all. We recognise that it can happen, and it can sometimes be a subversive topic that you don't always necessarily pick up. So that's why we remain as a key philosophy of ours to be proactive in continuing to suppress it rather than assume that it doesn't happen at all.
This is a hypothetical, not based on any school or experience, right? But if you could create a breeding ground for toxic masculinity, it would be an all-boys school. Because these people, these influencers, the Andrew Tates of this world, they thrive on twisting narratives in kids' heads. And they do that really convincingly, right? If you're a 13-year-old boy and you go down, and statistics prove, by the way, if you set up a YouTube account as a 13-year-old boy, then within 8 clicks, YouTube will be recommending Andrew Tate videos to you. So if you're that 13-year-old boy, you're impressionable, this guy's cool, he's persuasive, he's wealthy, and he's talking about women. He's not talking about your mum or your sister or the girl who sits next to you in class, but he's talking about the hypothetical. And because it's a hypothetical, really impressionable teenage boys are really susceptible to that, particularly if they're feeling unhappy about something in their lives. If they don't know girls, if they're not chatting to girls every day who are human beings, if they're not sitting next to girls in class, having those conversations with real human beings who they know and who they have relationships with in the human world, then I cannot see how you can effectively combat that negative, nefarious influence that is coming in through their smartphone, whether they put their smartphone in the yonder pouch or not during the day, whatever. These kids are going to access it if they want to.
Can I just come back on that? And I think as schools, all schools, single-sex, co-ed, we have responsibility to educate the children in our care on how to use their digital selves, how to use the digital media, how to be critical about the things they are seeing, and to understand that perhaps Andrew Tate is extreme. And that is not something that necessarily is going to affect all children. And I think it's very easy to blame that area, social media. But I think it's about educating them and how they use them, not whether they have their phone during the day. We have a very similar policy to yourselves in terms of the younger girls not having their phones at all until they have perhaps an hour in the evening, which is very closely monitored. The sixth form, we want them to learn to manage their own interaction with social media and with just their phones generally and talk to people. And so they are allowed them, but they are not allowed them out on site. And there's close things there. So I think you make a very good point, particularly with boys and being influenced by people like Andrew Tate. But I think that is quite niche, and that is very much a specific concern with toxic masculinity, perhaps. But I think generally speaking, it's our responsibility to educate them rather than blame, perhaps, toxic masculinity.
And I think without anyone who heads up an all-boys school on the panel, it's fair to say that the all-boys schools have really struggled in the last few years, in the last kind of 5 to 10 years. Really, everyone's invited was a real eye-opener for the world, really, to see how dangerous social media, but toxic masculinity can be. And all-boys schools, we know at the Good Schools Guide, have been cracking down on this. They have to. They have really strict, clear policies in place and a huge amount of support for the boys, and a huge amount of pastoral guidance to ensure that, any boy from an all-boys school emerges out of that school the best man that they can be. So it's really worth thinking really carefully about the questions that you ask schools. If you are looking at an all-boys school, if you're looking at an all-girls school as well, and if you're looking at co-ed, ask the questions to get the right answers that you need, that will satisfy you to know and get comfortable that this is the right environment for your child. Those questions are absolutely crucial, and I'm hoping that the panel here have given you an insight into the kind of questions that you should be asking and that you can ask. You can ask any school any of these questions. What policies do you have for this? What do you do for to improve uptake of STEM subjects in girls? What are you doing to improve leadership in girls? What are you doing to counter toxic masculinity? Have you had examples of it? What have you done? You can ask these questions to schools. They need to answer them. So that's been a fantastic debate. Thank you very much. I hope that's been interesting for everyone. And we do have a bit of time for questions. I forgot to say at the beginning that the Good Schools Guide, if anyone doesn't know about the Good Schools Guide, we have a stand over there directly opposite the stage. We review schools. So we've reviewed over 1,300 schools in the UK. We've reviewed all the schools that are represented here on our panel. And we have a parent journalist essentially who goes into the school and writes a report on it. So if you want to read any of them or come and speak to us about the work that we do, come and speak to us on the stand right opposite. And so questions from the audience, please.
Just a quick question. What's your definition of toxic masculinity, per se?
Who would like to answer that?
It can take a number of forms, and I also think it's a phrase that we need to be careful with in modern society, because what's starting to happen is we're imprinting it onto boys and they're pushing back against it. Toxic masculinity, when we talk about it in schools, we started to talk about it much more in the aftermath of Everyone's Invited, and it would involve the way boys behave towards girls, ranking girls according to physical appearance, frequency of sexual touching, sexual assault in schools reported by thousands of girls based on their experiences in this country over a number of years. But in the current age, it's begun to evolve more into the kind of, it's merging into the idea of incel movement, where young men are drawn into a belief that women are somehow inferior, somehow responsible for their troubles in life. It's a negative view of masculinity. It's also not a label that can be applied easily in this world to any particular young man, because it's nebulous, it moves.
Anyone who wants to learn more about how that has manifested itself in schools should research the Everyone's Invited movement. What happened, what evidence there was for toxic masculinity in a number of schools, what the schools did, and you can see lots of stories online, so that should give you a bit of colour.
But I would also say it's not a phrase which we should be regularly throwing around in schools when talking to boys, because it's the easiest way to drive them into that way of thinking that you can possibly imagine. We have to address this positively and build really great young men.
Thank you. A question over here at the front.
Thank you. Just regarding girls' schools, how are you addressing things like, I think we talked about gossiping girls and things like that. How do you kind of work with that kind of interaction and how they respect each other and so on?
Thank you. It's a really good question. And yes, we do have, I mean, they're teenagers, they're young girls, they will have friendship issues at various points. They will, sort of exclude people and then bring them back in, and that will happen. And that is a normal development in life. We all go through that. I would say that the girls that I have worked with in several all-girls schools, they are genuinely supportive of each other. They are genuinely ambitious for themselves, but just as ambitious for their friends. And that does engender in them a caring for each other. And the girls that make friends at all-girls schools go on to be friends for life. And they are nearly always the girls that land up being their maid of honour, the godmother for their first child. I can see some ladies in the audience here smiling and laughing. And that's absolutely true. If I can give you an example, on Saturday, I was at a tour morning at Benenden, and we had a young lady actually singing, doing a solo as part of sort of the performance after the head spoke. And I was sat to one side of the theatre, and I looked up to the gallery, and I noticed two of our upper sixth girls come in. And I thought, oh gosh, why are they here? And this was before Sophie, the young lady, sang. And I was thinking, why did they come in? That doesn't make sense. Anyway, they sat there. Sophie came on. She sang beautifully. The audience applauded. And I was suddenly realised they got up and they were leaving. And they were there purely to support Sophie. They were there to see her in her sort of moment of glory. And they didn't want to be a part of it, but they wanted to be there for her. And that is across my school, certainly, and generally in all girls schools, that desire to support each other. The well-being in girls' schools is, we know from stats, actually higher than the well-being in boys' schools. And I believe a lot of that is because the girls genuinely care for each other. They want to see each other do well. They want to support them. And they move beyond that sort of perhaps 11, 12-year-old sort of slightly bitchy, trying to find their space, trying to find their tribe. And they actually become wonderful young women who are confident in themselves, but also confident in their friendships and their friends' ability to succeed.
Does that answer your question? I had a very similar panel last time we had a show, but it was just about girls' education. I had 3 heads of 3 girls' schools on my panel, and the question came up of what do we do when, girls' behaviour starts to become a bit catty, a bit gossipy? And all three of them had different policies and procedures in place at their school as to how to handle that and manage that and work with the girls. It was fascinating to see the three different approaches. So again, really worth asking the schools how they do that and how much involvement they have versus how much they let the girls handle it themselves. So something to worth bearing in mind in terms of questions. Yes.
This felt like a bit of a debate of what's better, single sex or co-ed. But a message that the majority of you were giving out was to not pigeonhole people and to look at them individually. If that's the case, can you say that some students will thrive better in a single sex, some students will thrive in a co-ed situation?
I'd say yes, absolutely. And that comes back to the point that we didn't want to dwell on too much, which is that it's child-centered, always. Every decision about their future has to be putting them at the forefront of what you choose to do as a family. You will know your children well. Schools will try to understand them as best as they can. And I think what's important for you as prospective families looking at schools is to visit, as we heard earlier, and to ask these questions and to understand, does this culture, does this environment feel like the right place where my son or daughter is going to thrive? So absolutely, for some girls, a single-sex school is absolutely right for them. For some girls, a co-ed school might be right for them. My wife went to a single-sex girls' school. She's the best woman I know. So it is about finding the right place for your child.
And if I can just come back on that as well. I mean, I obviously meet with a lot of parents. I meet with all the parents that come to look at Benenden, as does the head. And we encourage parents to look around, to look at other schools. And I always ask them, which other schools are you considering? And so often they are considering perhaps one or two other girls' schools, but also co-ed schools. And I always say to them, brilliant. Go and have a look. Go and live the experience. Go and walk around that school, visit it, look at the girls, look at the boys in co-ed, see how they're working together, speak to the teachers. And absolutely, you're 100% right. An all-girls school is not right for every girl. An all-boys school is not right for every boy, in the same way a co-ed isn't. And I think you need to understand, and I think as you're saying, ask those questions, go and look at those schools, ask the questions that you know will be important to your child. You know your child better than any of us. And we like to think that we get to know them very well when they're with us. But when you're first choosing a school, ask those questions and think about, is this going to work for my child?
Can I say no just for the sake of being argumentative? Moving beyond the individual, schools have got a responsibility to change the world for the better. Fundamentally, it's not just about thriving in the moment, however important that is to each and every single one of us as parents. It's about preparing a young person to live and work and thrive in the world for the rest of their lives. And therefore, schools have to represent that world in every way. In the same way that if we were here arguing about selective versus inclusive education, I would be saying that actually just taking clever kids and putting them with other clever kids is not representative of the world in which they're going to live. Because school's about more than the grades. It's about more than the moment. It's about their entire future lives and the values that they leave with, that they imprint on their children for the good of humanity as a whole.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think we have one more question over here.
My question, we've spoken about toxic masculinity. That's come up. But what I'm going to talk about now is domestic abuse. How do you have policies in your school in terms of your safeguarding, your pastoral care? How do you implement that into schools to ensure that children who have maybe lived in domestically abusive homes or when they get older go through relationships, how do you prepare them for
Yeah,
this?
absolutely. Like any school, and all three schools here and all the schools here today will be, we're all safeguarding trained. We are taught to recognise issues with children, boys, girls, whatever. It might be that their behaviour is changing or they are showing signs of stress or other sort of manifestations that something is not right in their life. And that might be something that's happening in school, but it might also be something that's happening in the home. And we know from research that children don't need to be abused themselves to suffer. If they are witnessing perhaps domestic abuse, then that can have a lasting effect on that child. And as a school, we have a right and a responsibility and a desire to protect those children. And clearly there are lots of different initiatives and lots of routes that can be taken to help that child. And it's never cut and dried. It's never clear. It's complicated. People are complicated. There's not a right or wrong answer. But what I would say is that I think the UK is one of the best places in the world for our safeguarding of children, whatever the element is, whether it is toxic masculinity, whether it is domestic abuse, whether it is radicalization, whether it is any number of forms of abuse, we do pick it up. And I think domestic abuse is one of the most difficult to handle because children so often want to protect their parents. They don't want to speak out. They might be witnessing dreadful situations at home, and it may well be impacting on them at school, but they won't necessarily want to speak out. They might talk about a bully, another child on child abuse, but they're very unlikely to sort of want to say, my mum and dad fight and I hate it. But we, as schools, all schools, and that's regardless of the gender or the type of the school, that is probably our major responsibility in life, is to protect those children. They are at a very difficult stage of their lives. They are going through so much change, largely as teenagers, talking from 3 senior schools, and they need help. And sometimes they don't, and they can handle it. But as professionals in education, we need to be able to recognise that and provide the support that is appropriate for the issue.
Yeah, I'd second all of that. But I suppose returning to the original topic of the debate, there is an advantage here that co-education has in terms of educating kids around healthy relationships, because as kids grow up, they're 14, 15, 16, 17, they do enter into relationships with one another, both between boys and girls, between boys and boys, and between girls and girls in the world in which we live. And where those relationships are taking place to some extent within a co-education environment, we have the opportunity to influence, we have the opportunity to educate. And most importantly, where we see, for example, coercive behaviors coming into those relationships, and it does happen, and any head teacher of a co-educational school who tells you it doesn't happen in their school is lying to you, we've got the opportunity to intervene, to support, and actually hopefully to prevent these young people becoming the domestic abusers of the future. It's never foolproof, but it's a core part of what we need to do with these kids as well.
I would say as well that schools recognise that they're not always the experts best placed to provide the type of care that a child needs. And schools and the safeguarding teams will have strong relationships with external agencies, for example. So where there are particular needs of children that need external agencies' involvement, schools are well equipped to be able to provide those as well as the kind of the on-site support through counselling structures as well, for example.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I think that was our last question. So hopefully this debate has given lots of food for thought for everyone. Our advice to you is to inform yourself with as much information as you can about all the different options that you are looking at in terms of your choices for your child. Single sex, co-ed, all boys, all girls. There is a range within each of those, that is interesting to look at. Ask the questions of the school, look at the stats, get all of that information, and good luck. Thank you so much to my panelists. It's been really fascinating and really interesting, and have a great day.